So just a quick section I throw in to talk about the general strategy of factoring. No new tricks, no new rules necessarily, just kind of putting everything we've learned together. So reminder, first step GCF, then identifying what type of polynomial you're working with. If it's 4 terms, we try grouping. If it's 3 terms, and for right now, if it's that easy case x squared x no x, we go with the easy case number game. And we most recently learned the 2-term difference of squares. Lastly, the idea of making sure it's completely factored is just that idea that we saw in the last section, where whether you find a GCF or not, keep looking here, and even if you do one of these methods, make sure there's not still further factoring. Generally, further factoring comes from this difference of squares, if you can still do more. But just things to keep in mind. Just a couple quick questions we'll go through here. And again, nothing new, just throwing all this stuff together in one section, really. So we got our first one here. First step, GCF. Looks like we've got a 12 in common there. So 12 factors out. Leaves me with p squared plus 4q to the 4th. We factor out the 12. And so we said, don't stop once you have a GCF. The question is, what is this? Well, this is 2 terms. 2 terms meaning if we can go further, it would need to be a difference of squares. And even though we could say we found an a and a b here, the issue is that's not a minus sign, right? We need this to be a difference of squares. If we're going to factor that apart, this means that the GCF of 12 was all we could do. We can't break this down further. So that is it. Reminder, you only call a polynomial prime if there's nothing you can do. So don't think of it as if it fails this difference of squares, it's prime, because we did factor something. We factored out that 12. All right, let's look at number 2 here. All right, so first step, GCF. GCF is a 1 here. We have 4 terms, so we know with 4 terms we can attempt grouping. Grouping is putting those first 2 terms in parentheses, then always plus, so bring the minus sign in with that 25 there. Get this to focus a little better maybe, hopefully. There you go. All right, and now GCF of these first 2 would be an x squared, leaving me with an x in that first term and a minus 5 in the second. Here, these are actually both multiples of 25, and we'll pull out that minus sign because that's what we've been doing. Factor out the negative 25, makes that just x, and that all the way down to just a minus 5. If these numbers get too big, especially in my math lab, just use a calculator to help you figure out these GCFs and what's left over whenever you're factoring them out. Just divide out the 25 and see what's left. But importantly, we've got those 2 matching. So we can go with x minus 5 as the big GCF, right? And x squared minus 25. Now, here's something we didn't see when we first learned grouping, but now we've learned this doesn't necessarily mean we're done. Notice right here, x squared minus 25, that is a difference of squares. Now I'm going to come over here where there's a little bit more room up top, but this, if we talked about the a and the b, would be x and 5. So we had the x minus 5 factored out already. That was that big GCF that came out front. This we just saw with a and b will break down to x plus 5, x minus 5, right? A plus b, a minus b. That's that thing breaking down into those 2. Okay? What I will say is that's perfectly fine for a final answer. That's a product, it's fully factored. A little different thing here, and I don't want it to confuse you with over here. This grouping method, whenever you do grouping and those match, you factor it out as a GCF. That's why those 2 x minus 5s become 1. But a little quick notation reminder, this is something times something times something. It's in fully factored form, but you've got 2 of the same thing. At this point, if you wanted, you could call this x minus 5 squared, and then the x plus 5. But again, this is very different from this, right? We will never look at these and say, that's x minus 5 squared. This is the process of grouping where these exist as the GCF coming out. Here, you've got 2 of the same factor that you're just saying is the same as saying that thing squared. So that works as well. Okay, and number 3 here. First step, GCF of A4. So 4 gets factored out, and we're left with x to the 4th minus 16. From there, we see that's 2 terms with a minus sign, so let's see if we can find an a and a b. The thing you square to get x to the 4th would be x squared. The thing you square to get 16 would be a 4. So 4 sits out front, and we use that for an x squared plus 4, x squared minus 4. Now notice we have a binomial, 2 terms with a minus sign. So let's ask the question again, can we find another AB? Now that means this 4 wouldn't change, and this x squared plus 4 wouldn't change, but for the x squared minus 4, x and 2 for our A and our B are going to work, breaking this thing down to x plus 2 and x minus 2. So again, just making sure we always factor completely.